Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Finance Vice President webinar as part of APhA ASP's Webinar Week. Before we get started on the webinar this evening, I have a couple of quick announcements for you. Your webinar presenter this evening is myself. My name is Candace Lheure, and I'm the APhA Senior Manager of Student Development. A couple of quick things regarding the webinar before we do get started. You have the option of listening to the webinar with your telephone or on your computer with your microphone and speakers. If you do use the telephone, please use the dial-in number, the access code, and the audio pin provided by GoToWebinar, which you would have received when you logged on to the GoToWebinar system. Please do not use the dial-in number, access code, and audio pin that are on your screen right now, as they are just examples. If you are using your mic and speakers, please click mic and speakers to listen for the webinar. And of course, whichever method you are using, please be respectful of others and mute your phone or your computer speakers and your mic throughout the webinar. You will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar. I will be answering most of the questions at the end. However, I may pause for questions throughout the next hour. You have a couple of options for asking questions. You can use the question box that you see an example of to the right of your screen. Go ahead and type in your questions, and again, we'll be answering those throughout the presentation as well as at the end. You can always use the raised hand icon as well that you will find in on the right side of your screen on the GoToWebinar dashboard as well, and you can use that. If you do use that mode, I will unmute you and you can ask your question aloud so everyone can hear. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to be covering this evening, we are going to talk about the roles and responsibilities of the Finance Vice President position. We're going to talk about working with your chapter advisor and school officials within those roles and responsibilities. We're going to talk a little bit about budgeting, funding sources to include chapter dues and fundraising, meeting and travel planning, APhA resources that are available to you, and of course, I'll take questions at the end and provide you with my contact information. We'll start off with the role of the Finance Vice President. You have a very unique and very important role in your chapter. The Finance Vice President is really essential for ensuring the fiscal health of chapter operations. You are managing your chapter's finances. You're monitoring what your chapter members and your executive committee members are spending, and you're maintaining accurate and up-to-date records for financial reporting. And these are all aspects that we will talk about in the webinar this evening. Responsibilities of the Finance Vice President include many different areas. One of them is fiscal management or fiscal health. You are the one person in your chapter who is really going to advise your fellow chapter officers on spending. You are going to advise them on how much money you have, how much money is available. You are going to help them determine different funding sources to gain additional funding if needed to support some of your projects and programs, and you're really going to serve as an advisor for your entire executive committee and your program and your committee chairs. You, of course, are responsible for maintaining a positive balance in your bank accounts at all times. This is one of the most important things that you could do for your chapter. You never want to spend more than what you have in your bank account. You are also responsible for payment processing. Whether you do this or you have a chair or co-chairs or anybody else helping you, you are ultimately responsible for making sure that all invoices are paid, all checks are accounted for, and all reimbursements have been taken care of for the chapter. In terms of chapter reporting, you are responsible for providing a detailed annual report of expenses and income to the executive committee and to the advisor. This has to be done at least once a year in a detailed format so your chapter advisor can provide that information to the IRS when they do submit taxes during the tax deadline each year. I would also recommend that you provide some sort of report on a monthly basis to your executive committee members and your chapter advisor so they are consistently and constantly aware of the fiscal health of your chapter throughout the year. Fundraising is another activity that is under your purview as the Finance Vice President. You will oversee all chapter fundraising activities, and of course, if your chapter has a fundraising chair or a meeting travel chair or a meetings chair, whatever the terminology is that you use at your chapter, you would be responsible for overseeing the work that the individuals in those positions conduct as well. You are also responsible for finding additional funding sources. So part of that would mean researching and applying for potential grants to gain funding for chapter projects or meeting attendance. Another additional funding source might be donations, either in-kind donations of products or services, or financial donations from outside individuals. And these could be individuals within your university. They could be individuals from companies and organizations or local pharmacies. But that would be something else that would be in your purview as the Finance Vice President, is identifying additional funding sources if needed by your chapter. And of course, compliance. You are ultimately responsible, again, even if you have fundraising chairs or other individuals helping you with your positions, you are ultimately responsible for being in compliance and adhering to all college or university regulations regarding banking, fundraising, and reporting requirements. And we will talk about all of these in detail in just a few minutes. One thing I will start with is that you, in this position as the Finance Vice President, are going to you need to maintain constant contact with your chapter advisor, so your advisor is always aware of the fiscal health of your chapter. And you are going to do that in a variety of different ways, but a few of the areas that your chapter advisor is going to need to be kept up to date about are going to be issues concerning your bank accounts. It will be your job every year to make sure that the necessary individuals who are authorized to make deposits and withdrawals to your bank accounts is updated accordingly. So of course you should have the ability to make withdrawals and deposits to your bank accounts, potentially your chapter advisor as well, potentially your chapter president, or any other position that you feel would be helpful in assisting with this process. One thing that I will say is you do not want to have too many people authorized to make deposits or especially withdrawals, because you want to always have a good understanding of where the money is going and who is taking money out of your accounts. You, of course, are also going to be responsible for verifying that proper signatures are on all paperwork. It is always a great idea if you are going to withdraw money from the bank or need to write a check to an outside entity to require 2 signatures on a check, one being yours and one being potentially your chapter advisor's, just to have a set of checks and balances for the money that's coming out of your account. And of course, it is your responsibility to review monthly statements and no fees and penalties. So if there are any fees or penalties associated with overdrawn checks or anything that your bank requires, it's your responsibility to know that information, and it's also your responsibility to communicate that information to your chapter advisor as well. So hopefully that is an occurrence that never happens with any of your chapters, but just make sure that you are maintaining contact with your chapter advisor and discussing your bank statements on a monthly basis, discussing whether there are any penalties and fees for any transactions that have occurred, and that you are discussing with your advisor who should have access to your bank accounts. In terms of credit cards, not every chapter is going to have credit cards, but if you do, you again do have that responsibility to make sure that you are in constant communication with your chapter advisor, at least on a monthly basis, to review those monthly statements, to pay off the balance on time each month, and of course to know the fees and penalties associated with your credit cards as well. Another area that you are going to be responsible for in terms of working with your chapter advisor, and this is a very important area, is chapter taxes. Now, APhA is a 501c6. It is a not-for-profit organization. It is exempt from federal income tax on exempt activities, but not from state income tax. So all APhA ASP chapters, because they are part of APhA, are considered subordinates of APhA. So what that means is that the IRS does require that each chapter file a tax return each year. Now, chances are you're not going to owe anything on those taxes because anything that you do at your chapters, you're probably not going to be making enough money to have to pay taxes, and most of your activities are going to be tax exempt, but the IRS does require that a filing does occur each year. Now, there are two different ways to file your taxes. One is with your university, school, or college of pharmacy, and the other is filing directly with the IRS under APHA's group exemption. Now, this is actually a very timely topic right now because I'm about to send out an email to all of the chapter advisors in just a couple of weeks, letting them know that we need to update our tax list, which is something that we do every single year, and your chapter advisors are given the opportunity at that time to let me know if they are going to continue to file with APhA, or they're going to start to file with APhA, or if they are going to file with their university, school, or college of pharmacy. Neither is preferred nor looked upon in any certain way by APhA. We want you to follow the policies and procedures of your college or university. So please make sure, if you're not sure about your tax situation and your advisor is not sure about their tax situation, my contact information is, of course, at the end of the presentation. But especially if you're a new school, this is a great conversation to have with your dean at your college or school of pharmacy and or your student affairs department or your student activities department. Please check with them. Another option is checking with your business office at your school. Check with them to see what their preferred method is. Some institutions do require that you file with their school, and other institutions don't mind either way, or they prefer that you file with your national organization. There are different tax deadlines depending on the fiscal year. So the general rule with the IRS is that you have to file by the 15th day of the 5th month after the close of your fiscal year or your tax season. So if your chapter files with APhA, you actually need to file with the IRS by May 15th because APHA's tax year ends on December 31st. Again, as I said earlier, chapter advisors are responsible for filing tax returns with the IRS, not the finance vice president. We do require this because advisors have a little bit more consistency from year to year with the chapters, and finance vice presidents, of course, tend to change every year. So for that continuity, we do require that the chapter advisors file taxes on your behalf. Of course, they're going to file those taxes with information that you give them. So they will use information from the monthly reports that you give them, and of course, at that yearly annual report that I mentioned on one of the first slides is going to be information that you're going to need to give your advisors. And the type of information that the IRS is looking for is really your income. So they're going to want to know your sources of income, if you received any donations, again, in kind or monetary, and what your overall income is. And student development staff at APhA will notify your chapter advisors via email, usually early in March, just as a reminder about filing taxes, especially if they do file under APHA's group exemption. We'll provide them with an updated tax facts document and instructions for filing taxes. And we certainly are happy to walk them through the process and help them out any way we can and field questions regarding taxes. So in regard to working with school officials, there are a couple of different instances where you will interact with school officials. One is when you are wanting to solicit support for funding and or resources. please check with the dean of your college or school of pharmacy and/or your student affairs department. Some schools have very strict guidelines about whom you can contact or solicit for support and when you can contact or solicit individuals for support, especially when you are talking about faculty and staff and alumni or donors of a college or a university. They can be very particular about those instances. So please do talk to the appropriate school officials anytime you are soliciting support for monetary funding or resources at your college or university. You, of course, will interact with your faculty quite often, and they can oftentimes be great resources to help you prepare materials, educational materials, or to find appropriate locations for events, fundraising events, or patient care events, retreats that you might schedule with fellow chapter leaders. So use your faculty as resources to help identify, prepare materials, and to find appropriate locations for events, whether they're events specifically related to the finance vice president, which would be mostly fundraising events, or if they're events for patient care projects or any other events that your chapter organizes. And of course, you're going to contact the appropriate school officials, again, the student affairs officials, the student activity office. Anytime you are looking at organizing an event on your campus, make sure that you do check the organizational calendar or check with the student activities office. The worst thing that you could do is hold an amazing fundraising event that you know is going to gain a lot of attention and get a lot of people interested in helping your organization fundraise, but having people not show up because maybe there was a fundraising event 2 nights or a week prior to yours. So you want to make sure that you do pay attention to that organizational calendar so there isn't a lot of double booking or overlap in the same types of events, especially fundraising events on a college campus. You all know that college campuses, no matter how large they are, they're very small environments, and you never want to get into a competition situation with other organizations when you only have a finite pool of individuals that you're all hoping to solicit either help from or help with fundraising. So before we do move on, I will take any questions if there are about roles and responsibilities of the finance vice president position, or what your role is in working with school officials and or chapter advisors. And I do see somebody with her hand up. So Tatiana, I'm going to unmute you here. Just give me 1 second. All right, go ahead.
No, I think that was just a mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. All right, thank you. And I'm just going to check to see if anybody else has their hand up here. And I don't see anybody at the moment, so we're going to go ahead and move on. The first thing that we're going to talk about, or the next thing we're going to talk about, is budgeting. So you are all going to get very, very familiar with budgeting. And this is something that is going to be very important with your particular position. So what are some things that you'll budget for in your position as the finance vice president? Of course, you're going to budget for APhA meetings, and that could include Summer Leadership Institute, SLI, mid-year regional meetings, MRMs, annual meeting, the APhA Institute on Alcoholism and Drug Dependencies, the National Patient Counseling Competition. You could budget for supplies, for travel, patient care project supplies, retreats, food for meetings, and the list will go on. There are a lot of things that your chapters need money for. So these are things to consider when you're putting together your budgets every year. Now, developing a budget is another story. This sometimes can be a little bit tricky. You're most likely going to develop your budget during your spring retreat, which has already happened. You might potentially start the budgeting process during the summer or right before school starts. So some of you may be going through this process right now, but the majority of you probably have this done. And we would recommend that you do budget for the next year during the spring of the previous year. So that is definitely something I would recommend moving forward. Anytime you are looking at budgeting, although it's your overall responsibility to maintain the fiscal health of the chapter, it is not your responsibility to do all the work in terms of budgeting. You're going to collaborate with your chapter executive board and all of your committee chairs. So you are going to solicit their interest in what they want to spend money on. So you can put out a call to them, you could do a quick survey, you could sit down at a meeting and hold a budget meeting and ask them what are the items and occurrences or events that they are going to need money for, essentially. So it's best to do that in writing in some way, whether it's email or if you have an actual budget request form. And if you don't, there are a lot of examples online, but you could also go to your student activities office, and I'm sure that student government would probably have some examples for you as well. And in some cases, your student government may actually dictate that you use the forms that they offer. So it's going to be your job to then ask your committee members and your executive board members to let you know what they want money for. And ask them to submit budgets, give them deadlines to submit those budgets so you're not getting them throughout the entire year. Again, I would recommend doing this early on in the year, especially the spring beforehand if you can. Items that should be included are going to be any money for proposed events, expenses for travel, expenses for supplies, and then another thing to consider, of course, when you're putting together your budget is your projected net income. And this is where collaboration with your membership vice president really comes into play. You want to find out how many members you currently have, how many members you had the previous year, and what your membership vice president is predicting or what their goal is for the current year. So a safe bet is always to go back look at what you have currently for membership and look at what you had the previous year and kind of use that as an earmark to the potential money that you are going to receive for chapter and state dues. And then that will provide you with a pretty decent guideline for how much revenue you should be bringing in for chapter dues anyway for that year. We'll talk about fundraising in just a minute, and of course that's another opportunity for you to obtain some additional funds for your chapter. Now, if any of you out there are part of an umbrella structure, and you may have heard that term before, you may not have heard that term before, what that essentially means is that any student pharmacists at your college or school of pharmacy you are part of an umbrella organization that includes APhA. That means every student pharmacist is a member of APhA. So that means that you are going to get funds for each of those student pharmacists. So that is money that you know you're going to get. So it takes a little of the guesswork out of trying to determine how much money you're going to get for chapter dues. You're going to get a percentage of that because, of course, you're sharing the chapter dues amounts with other organizations, depending on how many organizations are under that umbrella and how your college or school of pharmacy has structured that dues payment and reimbursement process. So it's going to be a little bit different for every chapter. So going back a little bit, what I will say in terms of budgets is set deadlines, make sure that your committee members, your committee chairs, your executive committee members are submitting their budget requests to you in a timely manner and hopefully before the start of the term so you can start planning on where the money can go. And of course, it's going to be your job to work with your chapter president and your advisor to work out the details on prioritizing who gets the money and where the money goes. So that is sometimes a very daunting process, but make sure you do lean on the advice of your chapter advisor and work with your committee members to help prioritize. Sometimes you have to make those hard decisions, and there isn't money for everything. But again, we'll talk about fundraising in a minute, and there's your opportunity to gain some additional funds for your chapter. And do make sure that they adhere to your dates and deadlines. So if you put out a call for budget requests and somebody doesn't submit a budget request until a month later, unless there's some unforeseen reason why they didn't do that, let them know that there may or may not be funds available, and that the availability of funds is of course based on the timely submission of those budget requests. And of course, always, always, always remember to review your internal resources. So review what you have in your bank accounts currently, review your projected funds for your chapter dues, and then have those discussions with your chapter advisor and your chapter president. So I'm going to talk about funding sources next, and the very first one is going to be chapter and state dues. Now, APhA does not collect state dues for every chapter, but of course they do collect chapter dues. So you will get payments from APhA for your chapter dues on a regular schedule. You get 6 payments throughout the year, and you can see on the schedule in front of you when those occur. They always occur at the end of the month, so you can expect money to go into your chapter bank account at the end of each month. Your very first one, if we kind of go by the school year, is going to be in October, and that's going to cover all of your chapter enrollments from June through September. So the October payment and the November payment will probably be 2 of your larger payments because they also encompass the fall membership drive, which is the largest membership drive that you're going to experience throughout the year. The end of February, I will also point out, that includes the spring enrollment drive, but it also includes the rebates. There are additional funds that your chapter can receive through the fall membership drive, and that is an additional $3, an additional $1 that's paid to chapters for the fall membership drive, as well as the spring membership drives, if you get chapter enrollments or new enrollments for the school year by certain dates. And I believe that the date for the fall is October 15th is the date for the $3 rebate, and I believe October 31st or November 1st is the date for the $1 rebate. But check with your membership vice president for the exact dates on those, because that's additional money that you will have coming to you in addition to your chapter dues. So other funding sources that you have are going to be, of course, fundraising opportunities. So if you feel that your chapter needs additional funds above what you get for chapter dues, fundraising is a great way to accomplish that goal. Things that you can fundraise for are going to be, of course, chapter events or attendance at regional and national meetings. The APhA Back the PAC campaign, the Political Action Committee, APHA's Political Action Committee. You can fundraise for local, regional, and national charities as well. There are a lot of chapters out there who fundraise for other charities, or I should say other charities who do fundraise for charities, period, and don't take any of the proceeds for APhA. If your chapter wants to add that bit of philanthropy to the chapter, that's always a great thing to do. You can certainly, whatever proceeds you receive, you can certainly split the proceeds or just donate all of them to charities, and that's definitely something that's, of course, not going to give your chapter money, but it's a wonderful thing to do if you have the capacity to do that. In terms of fundraising, there are a couple important things to remember. Always evaluate prior fundraising events or occurrences to determine whether or not you want to repeat them. And always, always kind of take a look at what are the most profitable times to have fundraisers. Obviously, if you want to conduct a fundraiser that's an outdoor activity and you live up in Minnesota or Wisconsin, you're probably not going to do something in the winter. You're probably going to try to do something in the fall before the cold weather sets in. So things like that. Take a look at what your chapter has done in the past in terms of fundraising. Take a look at the events that have been very successful. Take a look at the time of year that those events have occurred, even the time of day that those events have occurred. A fundraiser on a weekend might be better than a fundraiser during the week, or it could be the opposite. If you are on a campus where the weekends the campus turns into complete ghost town and nobody's around, you probably don't want to hold a fundraiser on the weekend. You probably want to do that during the week. You also want to constantly brainstorm, again, with your chapter executive committee or even your chapter members. Ask them about fundraisers that they've attended or fundraisers that they've developed themselves, maybe even for other organizations or anything that they've done in their past lives. And you always want to develop new fundraising ideas and consistently evaluate whether or not they are going to be applicable for your chapter. So just a couple fundraising ideas for you here on the screen. I have spent quite a lot of time going through your chapter Facebook accounts just to see what some of your chapters are doing, and it doesn't seem like any of you are struggling with being creative. So you are all doing a very, very good job with that. So things you can do are selling things, selling t-shirts. If you have somebody in your chapter membership who's very creative and can design a t-shirt or design a water bottle or design something that members of your college or school of pharmacy or even anybody at your university or anybody in your community might think is a great thing to have. Tap into that creativity and design something and sell it. You could have a carnival, a raffle night, a game night. Everyone loves game nights. You can have movie nights, athletic tournaments, golf tournaments are always popular with people. Community dinners, career fairs, a ... blankathon. So you could do a dance-a-thon. You could do a Pokemon Go-a-thon, just to bring in something that's kind of new and fresh and popular right now. Battle of the Bands, talent show, a scavenger hunt. You can use social media to make your scavenger hunt more interactive, and post live clues on Facebook or something like that, just to make it a little bit more fun. So these are just some of the ideas that you can incorporate to get people involved, get them active, and to make money at the same time for your chapter. So just a couple of fun facts about fundraising. People want to give. People are always looking for an opportunity to help others out. So the one thing that I can tell you that is probably the most important to engage people and get them excited about your chapter is to foster relationships and let people know what it is you're doing and what your APhA ASP chapter is all about. You are all about getting out into the community and improving patient care and being a resource for individuals and groups of people in your communities. So let your school community know what you're all about. Let your broader community where you're living know what you're about. If you can develop those relationships and tell your story of what your APhA ASP chapter is all about, they're going to want to help you out. They're going to want to donate their time, maybe donate some money, maybe donate supplies if you're doing diabetes testing or immunization training. So fundraising is absolutely about relationships. So the more you can build relationships with anybody at your school and anybody in your broader community and explain to them what your APhA ASP chapter is all about and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to better the community, that's going to help you tremendously with your fundraising efforts. But of course, the one thing that you want to do if you do want to organize a fundraiser, or even talk about organizing a fundraiser is organizing a cohesive team. So get together with your executive board, your committee chairs, and also involve your chapter members. This is one of the best ways to get your chapter members engaged and feel like they're really a part of your chapter. Put together a small group of people to take a look at different fundraising options, to get out to the communities and solicit people for supplies and donations, and of course to help with those fundraising events. But get your chapter members involved. The more chapter members you can get excited about these types of events, the better, the more your chapter members are going to be excited about other chapter events too. So if you have a low turnout with patient care projects, or you want to solicit more help with other chapter events or projects that you're putting on, involving your chapter members in doing something that's a little fun and light, like a fundraising event, and maybe is only an occurrence that happens every so often. You're probably going to engage them and bring them into the fold, and they're going to get more excited about the other opportunities that are available to them as an APhA ASP chapter member. And of course, always, always, always write a thank you card or a note to anybody that helps you with a fundraiser, and that includes your chapter members. So if your chapter members are helping out, make sure you thank them. If it's not a thank you note, thank them on your Facebook page. Do some sort of shout out to them. But if anybody does give you donations, whether monetary or in-kind donations, or they donate their time, absolutely write them a thank you card. And a good rule of thumb is to do it within the first couple of days, within the first week after the event or the donation has occurred, is the absolute best thing that you can do. You don't want them to forget that you're out there. And if they have a good experience and they feel appreciated, chances are they're going to help you out in the future. And I alluded to this earlier, but always document and evaluate fundraisers, evaluate them for effectiveness. Were they worth your time? Did you make enough money? Were you able to solicit enough members to help out with the fundraisers? Document what went well, what didn't go well, because the finance vice president in the following years are going to want to have that information so they can plan for future fundraisers. And always, always, always follow your college or school's guidelines in regard to fundraising. I talked about that a little bit earlier in your roles and responsibilities, but if your college or university has any restrictions or guidelines to fundraising, whether it's holding a fundraising event or just soliciting help or soliciting monetary or in-kind funds, make sure that you know those guidelines and you follow those guidelines. There's some fundraising resources on this page for you. I will note right now that this presentation will be posted on APhA ASP's YouTube channel. It'll be up there early next week, so you will have access to this presentation again, and of course access to the websites here as well. I'm going to talk very briefly about meeting and travel planning. Again, if you have a larger chapter, you probably have a meeting and travel chair, and of course you probably also have fundraising chair or chairs as well. If you do not have those positions, of course the finance vice president is going to be responsible for all of that. If you have a large enough chapter, I would definitely recommend having these separate chair positions, because planning travel and logistics for meetings can be a full-time job during that time, and of course fundraising could also be a full-time job, if you will, as well. So whether it's you or it's a member of your committee who's going to help with planning meeting travel, or meeting attendance of any kind, a couple things to consider are going to be that your responsibility is to either oversee that process or actually conduct this process, but you'll be making sure that all chapter members are up to date about upcoming APhA meetings and events and important deadlines. You are going to be responsible then for coordinating hotel arrangements and making travel arrangements to and from the meeting, especially if you have groups of people going. And in terms of major regional meeting and even annual meeting, I guess this is specific just for major regional meeting, MRMs, you'll serve as your chapter's liaison to the MRM coordinator. And there's an MRM coordinator in each region. So you will work with them to, if you have any questions about hotels or travel arrangements, the meeting and travel planning chair can connect with them directly. And again, if there is no meeting and travel planning chair, the finance vice president could do that. This is something that you certainly could have another member of your executive committee do as well. It just depends on your chapter structure. And again, whoever is responsible for this position is going to be responsible for creating and adhering to reimbursement policies for travel and any amounts that might be refunded to chapter members. People will want to sign up for meetings, and then for whatever reason they will need to not attend them or back out, or plans change. Life happens. So if that does happen, make sure that you do have some sort of reimbursement and refund policy in place for chapter members, and you do communicate that ahead of time before chapter members commit to anything or any money is paid for anything. So just a good rule of thumb to have those guidelines. We have some resources for you on APhA ASP's website. So if you go to pharmacist.com/APhA ASP and click under Chapter Officer Resources, it is newly password protected. So once you click on it, it is going to ask you to log into your APhA account. But once you do that and you go to the Chapter Officer Resources page, you're going to see a newly built out Chapter Operations resource section. And you're going to find information in there on chapter finances. There'll be some information and examples for budgeting. We do have some sample budgets in that document as well. So if you don't have a sample budget, or your chapter doesn't have a budget, all your chapters should. But if you're a new chapter and you don't have those resources right now, you're going to find that information on our website. There's also some information about fundraising, some different places to go to find fundraising sources, and more importantly, ideas for fundraising. Our chapter cookbook is also a great option for you in terms of finding ideas, creative ideas to conduct a fundraiser as well. And there is a link for the chapter cookbook on this page, on your chapter officer resources page as well. And you're also going to find banking information and chapter tax information on here. APhA does need to have your banking information up to date, so make sure that you check with your advisor and past finance vice presidents to make sure that the information is up to date, and APhA does have it because that is how we send you the reimbursements for your chapter dues. And I do see that there is a question, so I'm going to stop here for a second. And Dawn is asking if there's a sample reimbursement policy that you can use. And that is a really great question, Dawn. There is not currently, but we can put something together for you. So if you can give us, maybe give me until the end of August, I will get something posted on this chapter operations resource section under finances, and we'll get something up there for you. And one thing I will mention, and I'm really glad that Dawn brought up that question, is that we are always wanting to give you all of the finance vice presidents, all of the executive committee members, we want to give you the best resources possible. So if you're looking through our website and you see something that's missing, or you can't find something, I'll give you my contact information at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to email me or call me. And if there's something that you think that your chapter needs, please let us know, and we will utilize our resources and get that information up there for you. Conversely, if your chapter has some resources and you're very proud of them, and you think you do something really well and you want to share that with other chapters, submit that information to the chapter cookbook or email me that information directly, and we can incorporate some of your information as examples on our chapter officer resource page as well. All right, so just a couple of housekeeping items. Oh, Alexandria is asking me to repeat the question that was asked. So Alexandria, the question was, are there sample reimbursement policies? So a sample form that you can use as a guideline. So kind of the lawyer language, I guess, if you will. And the answer to that was we currently do not have anything, but we are going to get something on our website. We'll have that posted by the end of August. So a couple things to note. Our student outreach program is underway. We do visit chapters every August through October, and we do love to visit chapters, mostly because we love to see what you guys are doing at your chapters, but this is a great opportunity for APhA staff and members of the National Executive Committee to come to your campus, sit down with you, and troubleshoot any issues that you might be having or answer any questions that you might have, and to do this in person. So registration is still open for this. We'll keep it open through probably mid-September, but spots are filling up pretty quickly. So if you are interested in having a staff member come to your college and chat with your members and chat with your executive committee and really help you with chapter operations and help kind of give your chapters a little boost in terms of membership, we're happy to do that. We're really excited to do that. Talk to your chapter president, your chapter advisor, to see if they've already submitted an application for a chapter outreach visit. If they haven't, go ahead and do that. But try to do that by the end of this month, because we want to make sure that we have enough resources in terms of people to get out to the chapter. So scheduling for that is underway, so the sooner you do that, the better. And of course, register for MRM. Now, registration will open in September, and I know everyone's excited about MRM. We do have the list of the locations on here and the times. There's a $125 registration fee. Again, that's something that you can fundraise for. So now that you know what the fee is, you can go ahead and maybe plan your fundraisers. And the registration deadline is going to be 2 weeks prior to the start of the event. So make sure that you note the deadlines and that you do register at least 2 weeks prior to the start of each event. And the website is on there for you to register as well. And this information, of course, is on APHA's website. So go to pharmacist.com/APHA-ASP, and there's information right on that front landing page for you. The FarmFlix competition is now open as well, and this year we are utilizing our national president, Kelsey Gallegos' theme, Together We Can. So if you have, again, anybody creative in your chapter who would like to make a quick 90-second movie, and it could be a spoof, a parody, it could be related to pop culture, it could be a kind of a commercial format, a news format. We would like you to think about using the theme Together We Can. Show how your chapter, how your community really utilizes your resources and band together, works together to make a difference in your communities, whether that's your school community or your broader communities. So the 3 categories, of course, are Best Picture, Most Inspirational, which is new to this year, and Most Humorous. So if you're a funny chapter, submit something for Most Humorous. If you want something that's going to be a little more heartfelt, submit something for Most Inspirational. And of course, you can submit something for both of them. And the deadline for the submission is December 1st. Go to APHA's website, and we'll have the information on there for you. And you're going to be able to cast your vote at the House of Delegates at APhA 2017 in San Francisco, California. And of course, stay connected with us. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We want to make sure that you are up to date with all of the happenings at APhA, and we want to make sure that you're just aware of what's going on, and we want to make sure that we're highlighting what you're doing. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I spent some time going through your Facebook page, your pages, and your Facebook posts, and I saw some great fundraising posts and great great highlights of what your chapters have done in terms of not only activities, but the things that you've done to raise awareness for other charities and to fundraise for your chapters. So make sure you're posting things on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, because we want to know what's going on at your chapters so we can highlight you on our national pages as well. And of course, this is the end of webinar week, but there is a Patient Care Vice President webinar coming up at 9:30. So if you are interested in listening in on that, please go ahead and do so. Your position, I mentioned, really interacts with the Membership Vice President a lot, but you interact with the Patient Care Vice Presidents a lot as well, because a lot of the times that's where a lot of your funding is going toward, are those patient care projects. So please listen in and learn a little bit more about that position. And of course, all of these webinars are going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, and they will all be up by next Monday. And at this time, I will take any additional questions that anybody has. I don't see any typed in, so I'm going to see if anybody has a raised hand. And of course, here is my contact information as well. Feel free to call me or email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help out. All right, just give me a second here. We're checking for questions. I don't see anybody with their hands up. I see some thank yous, so thank you so much for your polite thank yous. And I don't see any other questions. So again, please feel free to call me, email me if you have questions about anything that I talked about or anything that I did not talk about that you would like to follow up with. And enjoy the rest of your evenings, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.